We are starting now the last session. Thank you for being here. His name is Questioning Contemporary Urban Complexity. We have three speakers. The first is JAVIER RUIZ-TAGLE, I don't know if it's correct, yeah, from the Catholic University of Chile. Anna Katarina GRAÇA from here, from ISCTE, and Richard NEJMAN from Warsaw University Life Science. The first presentation is the title of first presentation is Urban Marginality and Institutional Effects, Disinvestment, Inefficacy and Stigmatization in Santiago de Chile. Thank you, Javier.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks to all the brave guys that are still here. You can have your phones to keep me posted about Brazil's game right now, so I would like to follow that. So my presentation is 3-year-long research. It's a long research with a lot of people involved. So I will start talking about the criticism about the neighborhood effects thesis. I will explain what it's about. Then I will try to propose an alternative institutional framework about it. And then some evidence from case studies in Santiago about these marginal neighborhoods and the connection with social problems, and always following this question about the practices of external institutions and their influence on the creation of social problems. So what are neighborhood effects? Neighborhood effects is a legacy, a direct legacy from the Chicago School. It basically believes or poses this belief that concentrated poverty leads to a number of social problems like welfare dependence, like domestic violence, like school dropout, and a lot of other so-called social pathologies. So from the 80s and 90s, there's been a lot of scholars working on this neighborhood effect thesis, and it has become a research tradition actually, with about 100 papers per year, especially in the Anglo-Saxon literature and journals and mainstream literature. But there has been a lot of internal and external critics. People working within this neighborhood effect thesis have criticized their own work in terms of the endogeneity problems, because they are studying people who have some problems, because they are studying the problems of people because they are poor. So it's like the chicken or the egg problem. And from the outside, there are more epistemological and conceptual critics trying to say that basically they are blaming the poor, like they are just sustaining that the people that are concentrated in these poor neighborhoods, just they are the cause of their own problems, and basically they are proposing that neighborhood effects doesn't exist itself or themselves, but the problem comes from external institutions. That is part of the proposal that I'm posing here. So we are trying to work with the idea of an institutional space. What is this? Basically saying that I'm not thinking in a social space, an environment created by people, or an economic space, an environment created by the flux of capital. Instead, I'm thinking in an institutional space, an environment created by different institutions that work in different spaces, in this case, in these marginal neighborhoods. So to work with this, I try to work with 3 different literatures, and one of them is the idea of total institutions that comes from Erving Goffman and Michel Foucault, both of them working with asylums and prisons, respectively. And basically they say that these institutions control the behavior of people, control the prospects of people and the life, the everyday life. So if we compare this idea, we can say that marginal neighborhoods have this control of the everyday life, but there is a lot of bureaucratic management of several of their activities, and the difference between the inside and the outside is quite large. In addition, we can say that there's a lot of practices of institutions in marginal neighborhoods that have been affected, their segregation, their social problems, and their connection with the outside world. A second idea in this alternative framework is the idea of institutional geographies. Basically, they study the role of institutions in terms of the management and organization of social life. There is certain overlap with the managerialism of the 80s, this whole literature coming from the UK, and the role of urban managers and gatekeepers, basically these public officials working at the local governments. And this approach is like a middle point between structural theory about society and individual cases in particular neighborhoods. So it was quite interesting for us. And a third part of this alternative framework is basically urban political economy, which is this alternative approach which grows against the Chicago School with a focus on economic and political institutions and their definition of material processes in the city. So they criticize a lot of the assumptions and ideas of the Chicago School, especially their view on segregation. They basically say that segregation is not natural, but instead is created by a set of institutions, and that was very important for us. So our main hypothesis here is basically proposing the idea that there are some mechanisms working between these institutions, external institutions, and the social problems created in marginal neighborhoods. So this group of institutions that could be private, public, or from the civil society affect the life perspectives through these three mechanisms. The first one is investments and disinvestments, and how these institutions stop investing in some neighborhoods for some reasons. Second mechanism is about inaction and inefficacy, in which a lot of institutions create isolation, indifference, they work with negligence or with weak presence. And then a third mechanism is basically symbolic promotion on one side, or symbolic branding, and on the other side stigmatization, which are two sides of the same relationship. So here I'm going to show you, this is the city of Santiago with the three cases. This is, as I said, a 3-year-long case study with mixed methods in 3 marginal neighborhoods. They're all very large, highly dense, and very poor. This is basically the yellow ones are poor areas, the blue ones are the richest areas, etc. So in terms of investments and disinvestments, we discovered this idea of the red zones. People started to talk about it, and that appeared even in the press and in several places. This means about the absence and the abandonment from several institutions that refuse to enter and refuse to deliver their services, generating a set of material and symbolic problems. And it's very close to the ideas of institutional desertification, food deserts, inner city disinvestments, redlining, etc. So there are basically 3 reasons why institutions create and perpetuate and reproduce these red zones. First one is the fear of supposed violence and crime, which is a mix of real victimization and media stigmatization. The other reason is the low economic solvency, which we can say that it's a market failure, but it's also influenced by institutional discrimination and exclusion. Third reason is voting abstention, in which political clientelism and electoral profitability influence the decisions on the physical works and social programs of certain particular neighborhoods on other neighborhoods don't. So if you don't vote, basically you don't receive any of these programs or physical works. So in one of these cases, we observed that there are no real estate development, no banks, no deliveries, no Uber, no taxi cabs, no hospitals, no police stations, no supermarkets, no retail pharmacies, a public transportation service which is very poor, a basic healthcare and education services which work with very low standards and the like. So what else? For example, here's a quote from an officer from the telecommunication company in Chile, from the telecommunication department in Chile. They say the red zone is where no telecommunication company wants to go, like saying, I invested something, all of our wires were stolen, it's not viable for me to go because the investment is going to be wasted. Then they are not interested in going to those places. Another example is the police, for example, but they work with certain patterns of territorial intelligence. So they have these police districts which compete between each other for having less crime. And some of these areas, like La Pintana in Santiago, work as punishment sites for bad officers. When they are in the process of being removed from duty, they are sent to these places, to these marginal places, so they receive basically the worst professionals. So there is a mixture between public negligence and private disinvestments. The voting abstentions of this area, for example, leads to public disinvestments, and this again leads to discourage of private investments. Thank you. I'm going to keep going because I have less time. So in terms of inaction and inefficacy, there is political clientelism and patronage with this co-optation of local leaders, with just sporadic and very visible works. And basically the state action and present, it does exist, but it's very intermittent and it's highly ineffective. And we review like 6 mediums of this institutional intermittence and inefficacy. First, resource targeting. There are different criteria and multiple targeting and fragmentation from different entities. There is institutional sectorialism with over-interventions and under-interventions. There is the politics of waiting with high demands and low supplies of services. There are inefficient human resources with very low skills. There are irregularities and apparent corruption. And there is an over-visibility of public institutions with an example of a fair that they organized, of a fair of present government. They wanted to show people that they are present in these marginal areas, and they put this fair, but people basically believe that they were absent, they were disappeared and retracted from these neighborhoods. In terms of symbolic neighborhoods and stigmatizations, these neighborhoods are believed to be urban hells or no-go areas full of urban pathologies. In Chile, there is a decreasing rates of crime and increasing rates of fear, which is obviously related to the high exposure to the media. There are several response strategies from people living in these neighborhoods under stigmatization. Some people dissimulate stigmatization, some people highlight micro differences, and some others try to denigrate their neighbors, their own neighbors. And some others just internalize completely these stigmatizations coming from the media. So I'm going to jump to the conclusions because I have just a few seconds. So there are a lot of social problems created by these institutional mechanisms. From the red zones or these investments, I can say that there are higher expenses in times of money when there are no services in the area. There are devaluation of the housing prices, there are underground economies and abuses. There is a direct reproduction of social problems. There are feelings of exclusion, relegation and abandonment, and loss of credibility in the state and in mainstream private institutions. In terms of inaction and inefficacy, there is distrust and social differentiation or internal discrimination within the neighborhoods. There is hopelessness, reclusion to the private sphere, lack of interest or apathy regarding everything that is public and regarding politics in general. There are ineffective treatments within all of these social programs and incentives to enter the penal system. And in terms of the stigmatization, there is a decrease in social capital, there is a distortion of existing social relationships, weakening of ties, there is a corrosion of attachments, and there is basically a general accumulation of negative symbolic capital and the reproduction of red zones. So basically, several institutions, by their action and inaction, are participating in the creation of different social problems. However, the explanation of this intervening role between poverty concentration and social problems is still a challenge for this research. We have to demonstrate how these institutions are creating these social problems. But still, we can have several implications for this neighborhood effects literature and the social mix policies. First, if there are institutional effects, the neighborhood effect thesis will become spurious, because this direct relationship between poverty concentration and social problems is not that direct, it's just a correlation. And second, in terms of social mix policy, which are intended to disperse poverty to stop social problems, they are becoming ineffective, unfocused, and irrelevant, because basically they are just working for one part of the problem, which is the physical concentration of poverty, but not on all the complexity that institutions create on those neighborhoods. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Javier. The next presentation is about Ana Catarina GRAÇA. The title is Formal City versus Informal City, from the Clandestine Neighbourhoods, the Concept of Urban Areas of Illegal Genesis. Thank you.
Boa tarde. Este artigo está com o título Cidade Formal versus a Cidade Informal. Não sei se isto está ligado. Está inserido no plano de tese de doutoramento a decorrer com o título Áreas Urbanas de Gênese Ilegal, reabilitar para reintegrar micropráticas para a requalificação do espaço público. Vou só tentar contextualizar este artigo, o que é que são estas áreas urbanas. O que eu pretendi vou aqui demonstrar é desde da construção clandestina a quando passam a ser designadas por áreas urbanas de gênese ilegal, neste caso AUGIs. As estratégias de intervenção no espaço público têm lançado novos desafios à investigação e arquitetura. Numa sociedade exigente com uma cidadania participativa e colaborativa forte, o espaço público assume cada vez mais um papel importante nas práticas urbanas. A partir da observação direta da ausência do espaço público nas AUGIs da área metropolitana de Lisboa, coloca-se a questão de investigação: como é que o espaço público poderá reabilitar as AUGIs para as reintegrar nas dinâmicas da área metropolitana de Lisboa. O objetivo geral é desenvolver uma estratégia para a requalificação do espaço público nas AUGIs, através de processos participativos colaborativos, e depois 3 objetivos específicos. Mapear as AUGIs na área metropolitana de Lisboa. Segundo, identificar condicionantes e expectativas para a criação ou reestruturação do espaço público dos bairros clandestinos. E, por último, analisar e classificar as boas práticas de intervenção para definir, testar e validar estratégias de intervenção nos espaços públicos dos territórios informais inseridos em contextos urbanos. Reabilitar, a hipótese passa por reabilitar o espaço público para reforçar a identidade e coesão social nas AUGIs, bem como reintegrar estes territórios nas dinâmicas metropolitanas, na medida em que conseguem criar memórias e relações de sociabilidade entre a comunidade e os outros. A metodologia simples, uma análise do território, neste caso com o mapeamento das AUGIs na área metropolitana de Lisboa, uma análise à escala do bairro com a análise do espaço público desses bairros clandestinos e, por último, à escala do espaço público, com a requalificação do espaço público, com a introdução dos processos participativos para definir normas e procedimentos de intervenção nestes bairros informais. O contributo geral pretende-se promover um modelo genérico de boas práticas aplicável a qualquer processo de requalificação do espaço urbano das AUGIs e uma nova, em relação à área metropolitana de Lisboa, uma nova visão do que são estes bairros clandestinos na cidade de Lisboa E, por último, um contributo para os bairros clandestinos, neste caso, alterar os processos de reconversão urbanística e a participação dos moradores na criação do espaço público. Agora, este artigo está inserido neste plano de tese que tem estado a ser desenvolvido, e o que eu pretendo aqui demonstrar é desde quando é que eles são construções clandestinas e passam ao conceito, então, de auges. E vou aqui demonstrar o mapeamento que tem sido feito com a legislação que tem tentado alterar estas áreas informais. Ao longo do tempo, as definições de cidade formal e informal têm sido alteradas ou adquirido significados diferentes perante os diversos campos da atividade humana. O principal objetivo deste artigo é apresentar as mudanças que ocorreram no território, tendo como foco a periferia da cidade de Lisboa, com a construção dos bairros clandestinos, mostrando através do mapeamento a evolução destes bairros informais na cidade formal. Desde a década de 1950, a industrialização e as mudanças nas práticas rurais levaram a uma aceleração da migração em massa das pessoas das áreas rurais para as grandes cidades, o que deu origem a numerosos assentamentos informais nos subúrbios das cidades. Um grande fluxo populacional desloca-se para as cidades à procura de melhores condições de vida. Este fenómeno que aqui está por Lisboa é representado em todo o mundo e tem diversos significados por todo o mundo. Em Portugal, na década de 60, desenvolve-se uma alternativa habitacional transversal a todo o território português, à margem do mercado formal, em áreas rurais da periferia de Lisboa. Na sequência do processo de atração exercida pelos centros urbanos, relativamente ao meio rural, este fenómeno atinge uma grande dimensão, sobretudo na área metropolitana de Lisboa, com a criação de múltiplos bairros clandestinos, através do parcelamento ou da construção clandestina. O fenómeno evoluiu para grandes dimensões e atingiu na década de 80 dimensões descontroladas, atingindo grandes proporções em alguns municípios da área metropolitana de Lisboa. A caracterização do fenómeno clandestino faz-se através de iniciativas promovidas pela Administração Central e executadas muitas vezes com o apoio das instituições académicas e a participação dos municípios. Destacam-se aqui 3 levantamentos. O primeiro levantamento que é feito à construção clandestina em 1977. O segundo, as construções clandestinas na região de Lisboa em 1984. E, por último, o último levantamento foi feito em 2005 destas auges. Em 1948, com a lei de número 2030 de 22 de junho, aparece o congelamento das rendas, o que vai aqui fazer o aumento destes bairros clandestinos, à procura das populações saírem da cidade para a periferia da cidade. Em 1938, a Câmara Municipal de Lisboa, sob a presidência de Eduardo Pacheco, contratou o arquiteto e urbanista Etienne Groux, que definiu as grandes linhas de desenvolvimento da cidade. Primeiro, organizar as densidades populacionais decrescentes do centro para a periferia e, por último, criar uma zona industrial na zona oriental da cidade associada ao Porto. Em 1951 surge o Regulamento Geral de Edificações Urbanas, que regula aqui as edificações, e em 1959 surge os planos de urbanização, em que foi a de disciplinar e regular a ocupação do território na tentativa de controlar e travar o consumo de espaços nas periferias das grandes cidades. Em 1965 surge o regime dos loteamentos urbanos, que pretendia que as autoridades administrativas, neste caso os municípios, estivessem aptas para intervir eficientemente sobre as operações de parcelamento urbanístico, havendo a obrigatoriedade de existir um alvará que titulasse a divisão do solo, sendo que anteriormente apenas era necessário uma escritura para registrar estes lotes clandestinos. Em fevereiro de 1954, a Câmara de Lisboa criou um gabinete de estudos da urbanização com o objetivo de proceder à revisão e à atualização do plano de 1948, criando depois este plano diretor de urbanização de Lisboa de 1959, que foi depois publicado em 1967. Em 1970, define aqui os principais normas e fundamentais sobre a política do solo. Entre 1970 e 1983, a Câmara de Lisboa pede um levantamento, coordena um levantamento de toda a área de Lisboa e aparece, possivelmente não se nota, em que em cima onde surgem os bairros clandestinos a vermelho, não se notam. Surge em 1973, deixa de ser possível vender estas parcelas de terreno rústico como lotes autónomos, passando os especuladores a vender as propriedades em alvos. Em 1966 surge uma nova lei dos solos e surge também em 1976 com o Decreto-Lei 804, o primeiro regime de reconversão das áreas de construção clandestinas, em que tem as medidas a aplicar à construção clandestina, bem como as operações de loteamento clandestino. Surge pela primeira vez a definição do que é que são estas construções clandestinas, em que diz, consideram-se áreas de construção clandestina aquelas em que se verifica acentuada a percentagem de construções efetuadas sem licença legalmente exigida, incluindo as realizadas em terrenos loteados sem a competente licença. Neste diploma apresenta as 3 soluções possíveis para a reconversão destas áreas de construção clandestina. Primeiro, a sua legislação, a segunda, a sua manutenção temporária, ou, por último, a demolição destas construções. Aqui o primeiro inquérito à construção clandestina, em 1977, que fez o levantamento apenas, demonstra aqui os resultados apenas das construções, ignorando os dados sobre os loteamentos e as parcelas desocupadas. Em 1984, surge a venda ao fim das parcelas do terreno rústico em avos indivisos. Volta a aparecer um levantamento destas áreas urbanas de gênese legal, neste caso em 1984, em que nos indica que as ações não são homogéneas e é possível tipificar os vários processos clandestinos, que variam segundo os motivos que lhe foram dando origem, o local e o tempo em que surgiram e a forma como foram adquiridas. Ao longo de várias décadas foi-se assistindo a diversas tentativas de reconversão e esforços normativos que terminaram em 1995 com a aprovação do regime excepcional para a reconversão urbanística das áreas urbanas de gênese ilegal. Com a Lei 91/95, marca a transição da definição de construções clandestinas para a definição de áreas urbanas de gênese ilegal, em que consideram-se áreas urbanas de gênese ilegal os prédios ou conjuntos de prédios contíguos que, sem a competente licença de loteamento, quando legalmente exigida, tenham sido objeto de operações físicas de parcelamento destinadas à construção até à data de entrada do vigor do Decreto-Lei 484 e que nos respectivos planos municipais de ordenamento do território estejam classificadas como espaços urbanos ou urbanizável. Esta lei das aulas exigiu aos municípios a delimitação do perímetro destas áreas urbanas de gênese ilegal, existindo nos respectivos territórios e a definição da modalidade de reconversão a adotar, por sua iniciativa ou por requerimento de qualquer interessado. O município de Lisboa não indicou que não tinha áreas urbanas de gênese ilegal e o município de Cascais, Amadora, não apresentaram resultados e o município de Odivelas ainda não era município, pertencia à Câmara ao município de Loures. Depois esta lei foi sofrendo diversas alterações, um levantamento de 2005 do que é que são estas áreas urbanas de gênese ilegal na área metropolitana de Lisboa, um levantamento de 2009 e este é o último levantamento que existe sobre estas áreas urbanas de gênese ilegal. Aqui um quadro comparativo dos diversos levantamentos que foram feitos a partir da Lei 91/95, em que existe aqui algumas diferenças. Do de 1996 para o de 2004 houve o dobro das áreas urbanas de gênese ilegal. Esta lei tem sofrido já sofreu 5 alterações e nos últimos 50 anos o fenómeno da construção clandestina tem sofrido diversas modificações que obrigaram a repensar as questões urbanas destes bairros. O processo de reconversão com a aplicação da Lei 91/95 já mostrou grandes resultados, mas a continuidade dos procedimentos de reconversão existente poderá pôr em causa a resolução definitiva do problema da cidade informal na cidade formal. Eu, neste meu plano de doutoramento, estou a finalizar agora o levantamento destas áreas urbanas, atualmente em 2017, 2018, começou o ano passado. Obrigada.
Thank you, Anna Catarina. Richard. Creative and innovative potential as a potential stimulant of medium-sized post-industrial cities development. Thank you, Richard.
So, my name is NEJMAN. I'm a PhD student of Warsaw at Warsaw University of Life Science, and I'd like to present now a pilot research, which is a part of my PhD. Why so strange name? Why medium-sized cities? You will see. First of all, I'd like to present the context of my PhD research. It's the context of present Poland and the results of economical transformations of 90s, where Poland switched from communist system to capitalism system, and it caused many changes in the landscape of the country. First was the collapse of traditional post-communism, often unofficial industry. Also a huge switch of economy, which first of all was based mainly on industry and was transferred into a service-based model. And these two things resulted in structural problems in post-industrial cities, which were usually medium-sized cities, which were simply developed around a huge factory, which was closed. And this thing provokes migration, especially migration of youth, of young people just after studies, to strongest metropolis such as Warsaw, Kraków, Poznań, Wrocław, or Tri-City. These were the cities with quite well-developed service market, even during the communist time, so it was easier to find a job there, and still is. And this fact provoked the population of medium-sized cities, and this trend is still continuous, and these disparities between the strongest metropolis and medium-sized cities are getting bigger and bigger. And a few years ago, luckily, the problem has been seen by the government, and there were some reports prepared, and also there is a huge document called the Strategy of Urban Development, which says we should do something with it. But there is no precise way how to do it. They suggest to maybe move some national institutions to smaller cities. However, it goes very slow because no one of the workers of these institutions want to be moved to a smaller town without airport or such infrastructure. And so basically everyone talks, there is a problem, we should do something with it, but there is no answer what to do and how to do. And during my master thesis, I was considered a bit on creative city theory, or theories, because there are few theories which are almost the same, but there are little differences between them. And all of these theories point out these three main aspects, that the creativity is a future for post-industrial cities. That's what Charles Landry says. Also, Polish scientist Mr. Zaborowski said that modern city cannot develop properly without creating its own creative class. He understands creative class not as a small part of the population as Landry, but as the average citizen is a potential actor in creative class. And also national urban policy, which I told before, suggests that we should put more impact. We should concentrate on creating more attractive third spaces in our cities to make them more livable. And that's why I was thinking, well, maybe something from this theory can work here. So I've chosen study cases. And the criteria of choosing them were the population of the city, between 50,000 and 200,000 inhabitants. It's a little bit connected with a Polish planning system. because these cities usually plays a role of sub-regional centers. Also, I want the population of functional urban area to be less than 400,000, because if it's bigger, it's starting to be a little metropolitan area, and I don't want it. First of all, I wanted to choose 20 cities, but for the pilot research, it's only 9. I wanted them to have a different administrative status, so they are the capitals of regions, they are sub-regional centers, and local centers. I also wanted them to be located in different regional and metropolitan contexts. So there are cities which are quite close from the metropolis, and many people just migrate every day to the metropolis to work, and go back. And there are some cities which are far away from metropolis, and they're located in different places of the country. And also, I wanted them to represent different demographical trends. Most of them suffer from the population, but some more, some less. Some cities are the cities where people immigrate to emigrate further, and some of them are simply emigration points. And these are these 9 cities which I have chosen. I don't know if you see the cursor. You cannot see, but there is a name. First number is the population of the city itself, and second population is the population of functional urban area. These cities, which are red, are the regional capitals. Green are sub-regional centers, and blue are local centers from administrative status. So, next thing, I wanted to compare how they developed. Of course, there's a lot of reports about the development, but I wanted to have one very basic database to compare them. So I used the simplest indicators that can be used to do it. So it was a population change in a recent 5 years, including the context of last 20 years, the budget income of each city, and it's important, it's a tax income. So subventions are not included, and unemployment rate. And I wanted to do it for whole functional urban areas to include suburbanization, which was quite interesting because Polish National Statistic Office collects data for municipalities, but not for functional urban areas. So I had to become a friend with Excel and calculate all the data for the functional urban areas. And here are the results. I think they are not quite visible, but what shocked me is quite low unemployment rate. It's lower than average unemployment rate in Poland, and the rest wasn't shocking. What you can see is there's one city, Rzeszów, which is by many scientists and politicians given as an example of the only medium-sized city which develops very well. And here we can see huge increase of population, while for the other cities it's a very little increase, and for most of them it's decrease. And these are the results of this analysis. So the development rating, we can see Rzeszów far away before the others. And later, what's quite interesting, between Gorzów Wielkopolski and last Tarnów, it's less than 1 point. So all the cities are quite developing in a similar way. So okay, now I wanted to see how do this correspond to creative potential of the city. I chose Landry's Creative City Index, which is, I think, very easy to be measured and to be found out. I will also inspired my master thesis. I won't read all these aspects from this index, but I grouped them into 6 indicators that I can measure, and I can give points and check out if there is a correlation. And these indicators are landscape location attractiveness, social climate, cultural services availability, higher education base, governance, including public participation, which is very important. I mean the participation policy, because every city in Poland have a participation policy, but some have better, more outgoing for the inhabitants, some worse. And also the quality of main third space. And on the right you can see the colors, which aspect of Landry's Creative City Index corresponds to which indicator that I have chosen. So how I did it? First of all, I visited each of the city, and I start from the study walk connected with quality interviews, which I made with normal inhabitants, with some urban activists, and sometimes I had a chance to talk with officials. And the interviews were about mostly social climate. It is relations between the people, and do they feel the sense of community with the city? How do they welcome strangers? I also asked immigrants. How do they feel about the governments? If they feel they have a possibility to express their needs, if they are listened or not. And also I asked them about what are the key third spaces in their city. Usually everyone pointed to one space, it was the old town, but in some cities, especially with a huge waterfront, it was also waterfront. Later I visited these places they have chosen and do a small study walk to find out how do they look like, what's the infrastructure, because I needed this data to further researches. To be just relaxed, here's one of these main third spaces. It's Tarnów, it's an old town. And later, when I returned from these journeys, I made more hard analysis. So first of all, I precisely delimited these third spaces of the cities, and I've chosen this one, which is the main. I did it after assessment of it. I used a very complicated long method made by Wojnarowska. There's a long table and I assess every aspect from 60 aspects of the space and I give it points. And if in one city there were more than one key public space, key third space, I have chosen that one that had better note. Later, I collected data about public participation policy in each city. It means if the city have participatory budget, what are the ways of contact with local government? Do people can chat with the mayor or not? Is there a possibility to give local initiatives? Are there not obligatory consultations? I mean, every city have to consult with the inhabitants some of the decisions, but some not. And if city also consults these ideas, they don't have to do because of the law, that's good. Next thing was gathering information about cultural services available. So if there are cinemas, theaters, if there is opera, philharmonic, and so on, so on, so on. I also take the number of the students as an indicator of a higher education base, because in Poland it works like this: if the university is good, it has a lot of students. It's not, it has less students. And also, I made a calculation of landscape attractiveness factor, which I made from the valorization of the landscape made by previous project by Polish Science Academy. Here is another key third space. It's waterfront in Gorzów Wielkopolski. And here are the results, because I have to hurry up. So nothing shocked me, and total score was like this. And what was interesting, again, Rzeszów, far away in front of the rest. And later we have very, very thin. Świdnica, Elbląg, from last place to second place, only 1 point of difference. So they are very close to each other. So what do these results tell us? First of all, I was shocked. Okay, Rzeszów is okay, it's not first place, but the rest is mixed. But if we look at the marks, I mean, during creating these indexes, I normalized all the data, so they are comparable. We can see that they are similar. Nowy Sącz, for example, 3.7 for development, 3.6 for creative potential, Elbląg 3.4 for development, and 3.7 for creative potential. So it looks like this creative potential corresponds somehow with the development, but in this case, when we have only one city which is high above the rest, it's hard to be sure if it works. So what I want to do more is to, of course, finish this part to adding the rest of the cities, to have 20 cities, but also to add foreign Central East European cities, which are known as creative cities, Tartu and Prešov. and see if it will say I was right or there is something missing in my researches that I have to think about. And that's all. Thank you very much. And here is one of the new landscape creative art. It's called Pedestrian Roundabout in Rzeszów. It's quite famous. Muito obrigado.
Thank you, Richard. We can now open the time for the debate. If someone has something to ask. 3 very interesting presentations. Yeah.
Thank you. I want to ask NEJMAN. Yeah. I want to know how you measure the rates. I mean, you have the indicators, but what is algorithm or the calculate method about you calculate all the rates because you don't mention in the presentation. Thank you.
You mean all the indicators, yeah?
Yeah, I mean how you calculate the development index and the creativity index. Yeah, thank you.
Can I answer now or Okay, so I will answer now. Of course, each data was different. For example, if we are talking about the number of students, it's a different number than, for example, the number of tools that the city use for participatory policy. So I do it like this. When I gather all the data, in some cases it was also evaluative data. So if something works well, 1, better than well, 2, fantastic, 3, doesn't work, 0. I found the best result of each of the categories, and it was 100% mark. And the rest of the marks were less than 100%. And as you see, during the creative potential index, there were 6 indicators. Yeah. So maximum point here should be number of points should be 6. So 100% for each factor. So I simply added each result in this percent, and I got the indicator. For development, there were only 3 indicators. That's why I doubled the final result to be comparable. So it's here 6, here 6. And node 6 is 600% because we have 6 factors, is the highest one.
Other questions?
Hello. All right. First, for Anna, I'd like to see some pictures. I'm eager of it. I'm from Latin America, and informal settlements are part of our landscape, but I've never seen those here in the first world. So I will, if you have the time to show it on the internet, maybe. And then for RYSZARD, why you didn't consider theories from richer Florida and especially data about occupational status, which is the main basis of research for richer Florida, in terms of the types of occupations that are considered creative in different cities, and there are a lot of indexes created by him. Actually, he is the main ideologist about that. So those are my questions.
Ainda speak Portuguese or the English? Estes bairros clandestinos na América Latina têm outra dimensão, que são assentamentos informais. Aqui são promotores, uma pessoa que é dona, vamos dizer, de uma quinta. Muitas vezes eles começam por ser quintas, em que depois vende ilegalmente estes terrenos e as pessoas vão construindo ilegalmente nestes terrenos e o terreno e a casa é da pessoa, só que foi toda construída ilegalmente e nunca foram legalizados. E muitas destas áreas ou destes bairros não têm espaço público, espaço coletivo, e o que se pretende aqui no doutoramento a decorrer é mapear primeiro e perceber o que é que são estes bairros clandestinos atualmente, estes bairros informais atualmente, perceber se houve alteração ou não em relação aos diversos mapeamentos que foram feitos ao longo do tempo, para depois o foco é trabalhar o espaço público com a comunidade desse bairro e tentar transformar estes lugares informais na cidade, introduzi-los dentro da cidade formal, neste caso na área de Lisboa, que é a área de estudo, apesar de ser um fenómeno em Portugal que ocorre em no Porto, em Évora, em Coimbra, neste caso o foco é a área metropolitana de Lisboa, e tentar introduzir muitos destes bairros existem bairros que estão dentro da cidade de Lisboa, dentro do limite, vamos dizer, do que é cidade formal. Outros estão nesta área metropolitana de Lisboa, muitos sim, os municípios com mais áreas ilegais são Cascais, Loures, Odivelas e a margem sul, Almada, Setúbal, e tentar aqui alterar esta cidade informal na cidade formal.
And now my answer about Richard Florida. I was thinking about him because I was also reading a little during my master's thesis. However, I didn't want to focus too much on creative class itself, because it's quite a controversial topic, especially a few years ago Richard Florida has written an article when he said that he was wrong. The creative class doesn't work like he supposed it works. And by the same time, 1 year later, there was also a book of one Polish researcher who said that it's not exactly like this. Creativeness is not connected only to creative class and so on. So I didn't want to step on this slicky topic of creative class. I focus on something which is more safe and which is creative potential simply.
More questions?
About post-industrial cities and creative class, questions for the two of you, for two presentations I could understand. When you now, after this initial research, you've done a look at the results, you've gotten, would you say that what's happening in these cities and this, if we can say, rise of the creative class and creative economy is actually good remedy for the problems of post-industrialization, of that industrialization? And what do you think about creative class? I figure you're not really a fan of Richard Florida. So that would be it. Thank you.
So maybe I will start. As for me, well, it's very difficult to say yes, because it's simply pilot research, and we can destroy something if we are wrong. But it looks like maybe not creative, but innovative potential, or the climate of creativity is good for the city, that's for sure. And about this rise of creative class, it depends who is the creative class according to us. Because for sure it's not only the creative industries which were given by Florida or Landry, it's something more. The Polish researcher Zaborowski called these people twórcza warstwa społeczna. In English it's called creative part of social people, but for him these are all people who works in a more creative jobs, who invent something, who creates innovations, who creates applications, new things, but you know, it's not only the art and things like this, but also, for example, creating electric mechanism which haven't been seen before. It's simple, the force of people to create something without, I mean, you are inventor, not just the worker of the factory, but you start your own business, and it's innovative, it's something new, and it's the creativity according to Zaborowski, and I will think about like him, that's the point, and if we see the creative class as this, yes, it can be the answer how the city can develop, and it happened in Rzeszów, because it wasn't like it developed all the time, it also felt in this crisis, but a few years ago the local government changed, they put a lot of impact to help the young people to create their own businesses. And they also invest a lot of people, a lot of money to create good public spaces, to create a good offer of leisure time activities. And now we can see the results. The city is developing. So it may be the answer.
Okay, I will answer just from theory and from the few cities I know. Of course, I don't know the Polish cities that he's talking about. This is all related with globalization, post-industrialization, and neoliberalization. Basically, main industries were being outsourced to other places of the planet, and local governments were trying to attract some type of capital. And within those types of new capital, the idea of creativity become mainstream because of Richard Florida. And a lot of local governments were trying to do a lot of different efforts to attract this type of capital, and of course forgetting the poor. Where is the poor in the creative cities? They are just bringing the new headquarters of this and this and these big companies, and bringing art and bringing some education, but the poor is getting less and less attended. What else happens? There is a disappearance of the middle class. The societies are getting disjuncted between this higher class or upper middle class on one side and the very lower middle class and immigrants that are trying to get some of the pie in the globalized cities and creative cities. And then even within the creative class, from cities that I know, like Berlin, for example, you will have the same split between some part of the successful part of the creative class and then the not that successful part of the creative class. So to be stereotypical, you have yuppies on one side and punks on the other side. So people that are working, of course, on the art industry, but they don't have enough money. So they are almost as poor as the immigrants. So it's becoming mainstream, like every city in the world wants to be globalized and wants to be creative, but it's not very successful for the poor, and they have bringing more inequalities and more problems and more disputes among cities.
More questions?
Yeah, we have to close this session also for the round table. So maybe we can close here. Thank you for your participation. And we also have, I have to say this, yeah? This book is of the Raquel Ronick is for 20 euros, I think. Yeah, you can sell that. Thank you.